Gracias. Bueno, yo voy a hablar en inglés porque mi español así científico es muy malo, entonces que también tenemos un invitado muy especial que no sé si hablas español, ¿no? Bueno, English is better. English is easier for you. So, well, first of all, thank you so much for being here. I was a bit afraid that there was nobody in the, like this summer and hot days, but at least there are some people, yeah. And thanks a lot, Pedro, for having me here all this time and for supporting me a lot. That's been like a big, big pleasure. I'm learning so much. And thank you for all the group in Pedro Jordano that are there every day. And we also have a very nice environment for working here, so which is great. So this is the title of this project I've been developing as the first time of this postdoc, and I'm here since January, so it's 6 months here with Pedro. And this is the final, not the final, but some of strength results. We think it's already quite good. And so it's about the idea of a meta-network in the, in the Atlantic forest. And just before starting, I have a bit more of acknowledgements to do, because I think this is very important now, especially in the context that we are living in Brazil well, anyway. So the Atlantic forest is a biodiversity, is a hotspot of biodiversity, you know? So there's a lot of richness there in terms of species and interactions there, as you see. And these people, especially in the top, Pedro there in the middle, but also Mauro Galetti and Marco Aurelio Piso has been doing a great job in the Atlantic forest in the last few decades, compiling a lot of information, generating information, and generating science of good quality, trying to get rid, not get rid, but get a bit off of the academic life and trying to get a bit more in contact with the conservation issues, a bit more applied. So that's really great. And also Paulo Guimarães Miúdo is working with us, developing a bit more these ideas of meta-network analysis. And then we have Professor Augusto Piratelli, one of his students, Sueli Moraes, that also collect data in the Atlantic forest of, in terms of SEED-DISPERSAL by birds. And as Pedro said, this project, myself, we are founded by FAPESP, which is the organization of the state of São Paulo that has been supporting science greatly, actually, in the last few decades. And that's because they have, turn 1% of the budget of the state of São Paulo into education. And that, in terms of Brazil, is doing miracles in terms of forming people and generating important information there. So this is something I think people should know and should be replicated in more places. That's just 1% of the whole budget, and it's great. And FAPESP also has some possibilities for foreign people as well to go to Brazil to collaborate or even to get some kind of funding. So if you are interested, you can have a look in their website. This project is part of a BIOTA, which is a bigger project that's trying to understand different aspects of the change that are going on in the Atlantic forest. UNESP is the university where I'm based in Brazil, this is the University of São Paulo. And then LABIC is the biology conservation group that is mainly led by Mauro Galetti. And Pedro has been working there for many, many years with great contributions. And LABIC is generating a lot of nice and important information in terms of knowing the Atlantic forest and conserving the Atlantic forest in different groups, not only birds, as I'm going to show you, but also small mammals, fish, and basically all the groups that are occurring there. And this is the website, so you are invited to have a look over there if you want to know a bit more about what these people are doing. And this is just a very fresh picture. You see that Pedro is over there. They had this annual meeting just a few weeks ago. And just to show, it's a big group, and there's a lot of expertise together, coming and working together to try to do something nice. And of course, we play capoeira in Brazil, so that's always very, very important to say. So that's it about marketing for the moment. And of course, one of the main things that LABIC, people in LABIC have been doing the last years is working with SEED-DISPERSAL. And that's not random, it's because in tropical forests, we know that up to 90% of the plant species rely on animals to be dispersed, so that's a very important process. And it's a variety of shapes, of color, of the diversity of seeds and fruits is just amazing. And in this project, especially, I am interested in birds seed dispersion, so the process led by birds. And as I said, The data set that I'm working, I should have said I am not an ornithologist, so all the information comes from a data set that those people, in collaborating with students and other groups, have been compiling the last few years. And this data set comes from the Atlantic forest. As you can see in the left panel, the green areas, I guess most of you have seen this before, but anyway, that was the original distribution of the Atlantic forest. So it would go from the northeast of Brazil to the south, and also would go a bit in Uruguay, Argentina, and Paraguay through inland. Unfortunately, nowadays we have only 12% of this forest remaining, and it's basically in fragments, very small fragments. So in this context, we compile information of forest fragments, and we end up having 16 communities. So those are studies that have been developed to understand plant and bird interactions at the community level. And we have a gradient of pristine forest, so it would be the green areas, from larger, small, and some restored areas as well. And as you see, we have a bit of a clump of studies in São Paulo, and that's also not random. That has to do with what I said before, so is where most of the information has been generated in the last few years. And then we have some more sparse points distributed along the Atlantic forest. And so we think about these studies and these fragments as networks, of course. No? So these are bipartite networks, that's more common type of networks that have been developed a lot by Pedro Jordano. So that's one of the reasons why I'm here as well. We are in the center of generating information in terms of ecological networks. And so you have on one side the plants, let's say the green areas, and you have the yellow points that would be the birds, and then you have the links that are representing the interaction. So you can see here is just like quick illustration that you can have different structures depending of the type of fragment you're looking at. So you have more pristine, very rich, complex networks until you go, this would be a restored area with 8 years old only, now maybe 10. And then you see that it's much more simplified, less species, less interactions. When you look at those, well, we are interested in here in how these networks respond to the main effects in anthropogenic effects in the Atlantic forest that are defaunation. So is the non-random extinction of species lead to the large body mass species first, no? So those are the ones that are disappearing first. And that's due mainly to hunting, that's a big problem in the Atlantic forest, and also to habitat loss as a direct effect. And we are also interested in fragmentation, as I said before. So if you look just at the local structures, the local network structures, this is just a brief, just to understand a bit more the context, but I'm not going into details of the metrics, but if you look at some metrics of these networks, we see that they respond or they are affected a lot by defaunation. So for example, these ones, no, you have the large and the small ones, and then you see this change on the network structure here. And then, and this is the same for area. So area really plays an important role in the structure of these local networks. This is something that's very interesting as well, but here in this study we are interested much more how these networks, how these communities can be connected if they are connected and they have to be connected. No? So what we did here is developing a bit more this concept of meta-network that comes from meta-population, meta-community, meta-networks. And this is kind of the first attempt to use empirical data to develop this idea. So it's a large-scale study. And what we did is this is our hypothesis, no? So working hypothesis here. In these diagrams, you see each of those would be one of those communities I showed you before. So we have one side the plants, the other side the birds in this case, and then the links, the interactions. The idea here, if we focus in the red lines, are those interactions that are actually repeat in the landscape. So these interactions here occur in this fragment, and also occur in this fragment, and also in this fragment in that way. So they are shared interactions among fragments. The idea is that these shared interactions are the ones that are potentially connecting these fragments in the Atlantic forest in a fragmented landscape. So apart from identifying who would be these shared interactions that build this backbone of a meta-network structure, we're also interested in who are these interactions. So we hypothesized that body mass, body size is related with the capacity of flying most of the time. So the interactions performed by birds that have a larger body size would have a higher probability of being connected in the meta-network. But on the other side, also, we need generalist species because those are the ones that are able to live or to persist, if you like, in more fragmented areas. So generalist species, generalist interactions performed by generalist species would also be the ones with more potential to connect this landscape. So basically, there's two main goals in this study. One is to understand the structure of this meta-network in this fragmented and highly rich biome. And the other one is identify these central interactions, central in terms of who are the ones that are connecting the fragment, right? And then I explain a bit later the concept of mobile links as well. So how we did it? As I said, I'm talking all the time about interactions because we are focusing more on the interactions. So this is very simple. It's just instead of working with species, we work this interaction unit, as we call. That's the combination, basically, the plant and the bird, and then that's how we work with this data set. No? And then instead of having the traditional bipartite combination of plant and birds, where you would have your plants in rows and the animals in columns, here we build this matrix. And we have the sites, so each site, each of the 16 is one row in our matrix, and the interaction combination is one column. And if I explain this better here, actually. So this is the line, so each line is one of those 16 sites, and this is each of those interaction unit combination. No? If this interaction here occur in intervals in the first site, the matrix, the cell is filled with 1, otherwise it's 0. So it's a presence-absence matrix, right? And so I just highlight some here to show you. This is the first part of the real matrix. And it's a large matrix, it's a complex system. Just advancing a bit the results. This is the number of interactions we have, over 2,000 unique interactions, unique pairwise interactions. And then here I also put in green just to give an idea of what we understand about this concept of connecting the fragments and working as mobile links. So like this green interaction here, you see it occurs in 3 sites. So it's already an indicative that it could be working as connecting this landscape, right? And then basically all the results I'm going to show you is based on this matrix. Sorry, I need some water. So the results. As expected, we have a lot of species, over 300 species of plants in these 16 communities. We have a lot of species of birds as well, 173 species of birds. And when we look at interactions, the combination of both, we have these very large and impressive, over 2,000 unique species interactions at the species level. Then we also calculate for the general level by curiosity. And this is just the value of summing up everything. And so I'm not focusing much on the methods here because it's quite a lot of results to show. And I try to explain step by step what we have done. And then we can talk later if someone is more interested in more details. So this is what is giving us this. So this is the meta-network, the real meta-network. And I show you, this is made on this package, Network 3D. And I try to show you this online. So this is on, this is on Pedro's GitHub. And here we already have a bit of explanation about the project, a bit of explanation about the algorithm and everything. And it's nice because it's a dynamic graph. So let's see if it works. It's a heavy matrix. So this is what it does. It's quite magic. It's very slow internet, and the file is quite heavy. But this is basically that matrix I showed you before. And this is what it does, is organize the nodes. So here, each of these circles, each of these ones is one of those interaction units. And the middle circle there is one of the 16 sites. So it does is optimize the way that these links are arranged in this meta-network context, and also try to put the more central nodes, the more central interactions in the middle of the graph. So you can come here, it's still organizing itself. But if you click here, for example, you can see the name of the species. It's a complex system, so this is nice for complex structures where you cannot really plot everything in a graph like that to see where are the species. So you can come here and see this one, and see if you come here, you see this is intervallis. Oh, I don't know if you can see, but it's the larger forest patch in the Atlantic forest, actually. And you see, so I try to explain you this. Each of these is a node, and you see that all these nodes here, they are connected to intervallis. So they just occur in intervallis. This is what it means. And then you have some of these other nodes that are kind of outside the cloud of nodes. Those are the ones that occur in intervallis and also occur in this other fragment that you can't see here because it's quite heavy and I can't move it much. But it would be like, for example, this one here is another site. So these interactions here are connecting in terms of the backbone of this meta-network structure, this fragment with this fragment, right? So this is basically what we have. I see if I go back. Oh yeah, great. So this is what we have here. This is just a static picture of those. So here the squares, we change it for squares here, is each of these fragments. And the nodes, the circles are each of these interactions. So you see you have 16, actually, if you count, I'll show you later, 16 modules that are the 16 fragments. So you organize itself very nicely, and it has important implications. And then we have just a few interactions that are connecting, actually, making this row of potentially connecting these fragments. So this is just the address, is on GitHub of Pedro, if you want to have a proper look there. Here I was just illustrating in case it didn't work, the internet, but nicely worked. So the interactions, the nodes are the interactions, and so on. And in terms of structure, as I said, it's quite amazingly that each of the fragments is one distinct model in this network, because it could be that they are just like mixed together, but no. And that is a highly modular structure and is very poorly connected, as I said. And this, so what does it mean in terms of whatever, understanding this system? No, so it can be both. It can be fragile or it can be a bit robust. Theoretically, it can be discussed that if you have a disturbance within a module, the network that is modular can be more resistant because the disturbance will not easily spread to the whole network, right? So it could confer some robustness to this system. On the other hand, it could be very fragile because it's poorly connected. So if you remove one or two of those connectors, you're probably going to have a collapse in your system. And we are also interested in another property of this network, this spatial network, if you want to call it, that's nestedness. And we are interested in nestedness in a way, if you remember when I said that the matrix can be organized from the larger fragments in terms of area to the smaller ones. So this could provide us some kind of organization in terms of the smaller fragments would be subsets of the larger ones. That's called what's a nested structures in terms of space, for example. And that would have some implications for that you could think about sourcing dynamics as people have been doing in meta-population and meta-community. You know? So the larger ones could work like as a reservoir, let's say, of species and interactions. But in fact, that's not what happened anyway. So we found significant nestedness, but that's very, very, very small proportion of the whole thing. And I explain you in this graph. So this is the Atlantic forest with the larger fragments and the small ones and so on. What we found is a very low spatial net. What it means that the species, the plant, start by the plant, no? So the plant community that's in the larger fragments are very distinct of the plant communities that are in the smaller fragments. And this, when we calculate the metric, is significant, it's very low. The same happens for the bird species, so the communities are completely different from each other, and that's not very dependent of the area of the fragment. And then the nestness should come. And then, of course, when you look at the species-species interactions in this context of spatial nestness, we have just around 3% that would work would function in this organization from the larger to the small ones. And then we tested that at the genus level as well, just in case. And instead of having this structure, what we have is a very high beta diversity and turnover of species and interactions in these fragmented Atlantic forest. So here we look at two components of beta diversity. This one is just including the turnover together, so it would be the nestedness of species combined with turnover, that is the change in the communities. And then you see that it's very high, so one, just remembering, would be that everything is different of everything. So either by beta diversity or turnover. And we look at the genus level as well, it's super high, it's a bit lower here, but still the turnover means that the communities are actually very different from each other. And then, of course, when you look at the beta diversity of interactions, it's almost 100% different from fragment. And this has everything to do with the structure of the metanetwork. So we close all the nodes there, let's say. So this resembles the fact that each forest fragment is a model in this meta-community context or metanetwork. And so this is the first part of the idea of understanding this metanetwork. And now we focus a bit more on these guys that are the ones that could make this function of connecting the fragments, right? So we want to know who are they at first. And we want to know who are they because they can work as mobile links. So what's a mobile link? Mobile link is this function of moving propagos of plants in the landscape context. Not necessarily a fragment, but it becomes really important in a fragmented context because you want to have the movement of species, the gene flow among almost isolated communities, let's say. So this is important in a fragmented context. And there are different ways of doing this. Here we choose this one. We choose measures of centrality that we have the pleasure to have here Jens Ollensen today, that was the PI of this work, actually, that when we incorporated these ideas that come more from social science to more ecological studies. And here we work with two of those centrality measures that are degree, that basically in this context tells you how many sites, how many fragments, let's go, each of these interactions occurs. So it has higher degree if it occurs in more sites, right? So degree of 2 means that it occurs in 2 sites, and so on. And betweenness is another metric that what it does, it tells you the ability of a node, that's an interaction in the network context, to connect more efficiently different parts of your network structure, right? So it works like a connector, making the cohesiveness of this network strongly, let's say. So this is a horrible graph, and it doesn't matter that you don't see here because this is supposed to be all the over 2,000 interactions. And what it's telling us is that most of the interactions in terms of degree, this is normalized, so have a very low degree. So it means that they occur in just one site. That's exactly what we saw in the analysis of the metanetwork structure. And we are interested in the tail, in fact. This is the important information because if you look in more details, we see we can see the identity of these interactions. And you see that, in fact, less than 80% of the whole interactions in the Atlantic forest can potentially work as mobile links if we consider this proxy that shared or co-occurrence or shared fragments or shared interactions would be a good proxy for connecting the landscape, right? And then we have over 80% of the interactions that occur in a single site. That's what this index is telling us, basically. And then when you look at betweenness, the same. all the interactions basically have zero betweenness. Zero betweenness means that it doesn't have any potential to connect the network. And if we look at the tail again, we can see the identity of these species, right? So, and again, it's just a very number of species that have some potential. It's around the 200 as well. So we know who are the species performing these potential mobile links interactions. And if we did a bit of exercise here just to make it more clear for us and for people also, no, of course. So this is the normal structure. And on B, what we did was to remove from here all the interactions, all the nodes that do not have any significance as betweenness connector. So here is just those that have at least some potential to work as a mobile link in this meta-network structure. And you see it's a very simplified, it's much simplified structure. And on C is the opposite. If you remove the connectors, then we have all the fragments isolated in the landscape. And now going to the end, we also want to know which traits would be more, let's say, efficient perhaps, but which traits are associated to these potential mobile links, right? And to do that, we use this data paper that's called Atlantic Frugivory, and here I do a bit more of marketing, because the Atlantic, it's the first of a series of data papers coming from those people working in the Atlantic forest in the last few decades. This one is about frugivory, not only by birds, but for many functional groups. And it has over 8,000 records of interactions. And it's free for everyone to use. And it's published already in Ecology. And it brings you a lot of information about the species that are performing whatever record is there. So the location of the record, who made the record, the traits of the plants, for example, I don't know, the seed diameter, which is the one we're interested, the height of the plant, about the frugivore species, so the body mass, in case of the bird, the gape side, and so on. Also the status, if it's vulnerable or not in terms of conservation. And now they have other data papers about amphibians. I saw yesterday bats, small mammals is published already. Traits, and another one that I forgot. Anyway, it's a series of papers there. So here we're interested in these two traits, body mass, seed diameter, and wood density. I guess we all know that body mass is important in terms of dispersing because it tells you, in this case, which is the range of seed that a bird can eat and can disperse, and also could be correlated with the distance of flight and so on. The seed diameter as well, bringing the traits of the plants, and wood density that's becoming, people are really showing more how it is important in terms of capturing carbon from the atmosphere in the whole context of restoring and conserving tropical forests, not necessarily, but temperate forests as well. And then this is just to show you, we made this correlation with the degree here and the betweenness, and then another index of centrality. And then we have this very funny and weird distribution of data. So we tried different models to see if we could capture a bit of these variance in the data set, but as you saw, it's very rich, and so it's very rich in terms of everything, not just the numbers, but in terms of the traits of the species that are there. And we have always this clump here, and then we have some kind of outliers, let's say, that are leading to a trend of decreasing on downsize of body mass, for example, related with traits. So what we got in the end from this is this trend on downsizing of traits. No? So if we just perform a correlation between these variables, we see that we have some significance on decreasing body mass, decreasing seed diameter very slightly, and then something on wood density. So those are, the main message from here is those central interactions, the one with more potential to connect the fragments, are the ones that have smaller body mass, smaller seed diameter, and lower wood density. So that's the main message. And then going back here, when we group these as functional groups, if we make a category of according to the body mass and the seed diameter of these interactions, we have this large, which is performed by birds with large body mass, and then that are dispersing seeds with large seed diameter. And then these small ones, it is small is the other trend. So small-bodied birds with small seeds, we see that most of the interactions in the whole meta-network context are performed by small interactions. And then just a few of them by large interactions. So this is very interesting. And then we have some in the middle ways performed by large birds dispersing some small seeds, and then some small birds eating or dispersing some parts, let's say like that, of the large fruits. And then I skip this now. And this is just two examples of these high centrality interactions with small body mass of the bird and small seed diameter. So these, as you see, it's a very Eschinus has a very tiny seed diameter. It's being dispersed by this tiny bird. And then the other one is Trema. That's 1.7 millimeters of seed diameter. And Dacnis is super small bird. Beautiful, but small. So what's the implication of these? Though these seems to be very important in terms of performing this cohesiveness in this system, but they are actually very generalist species that tend to occur in more disturbed sites. So they are typical of secondary forest growth. So what does it mean? They have a rapid growth in terms of lifetime. The plant side, they have low capacity of carbon storage. They usually are generalists in terms of behavior, in terms of habitat that they live. And these may have important implications in terms of the dynamics of this structure in the long term, and also if you want to recover some of these fragments to the original structure. So here I just got this picture from Carol Bello and Labic that they publish, Pedro is together. So it's just showing, here they show this is like a pristine forest with all the functional groups that you'd expect to see, but then in our case, as you go to more fragmented areas, you'd have this change in the forest structure because we don't have the interactions arriving there anymore performed by these big sized animals, right? So this is kind of change in the forest structure that you could expect in case this is true. And this is just another one to show the gap. There's Jacutinga is the larger frugivore we have in the Atlantic forest, the large bird frugivore, and it's over 1 kilo. And these are the guys that are performing the central interactions in this meta-network structure. They're tiny ones, so you have all this defaunation effect, if you like, in the middle here. And now really to finish, this is nice graph where we relate a bit more straightforward with the area of the fragments, those 4 functional groups. So as I said before, these are the small ones that are dominating the meta-network context. And then here are the large. As you see here, this is telling us the probability of finding or the cumulative occurrence of each separately of each of these functional groups according to the area, right? So if we see, starting by the small ones, they would go from, if you have a fragment of 10 hectares, for example, you would have around 10% of the overall pool of interactions performed by small species, no? Small interactions. And as you increase the area, you're gonna be adding more and more different interactions until the point in the very large, so this is very large fragments, no? Over 10,000 hectares, then you're gonna have the whole pool of small interactions. But when you look at the red line, that's the large ones. You see that you need a lot of area. You need more than 10,000 hectares to find 50% of these large interactions that were recorded in the meta-network context. And then you see the same similar patterns that need a lot of area to get the red one is performed by the large. So to have around 20% of this functional group, you need large area as well, and similar for the other functional group. So who are the winners in this fact? No, the small are actually really important. Apparently, they are the ones that seems to be dominating this fragmented landscape. And in terms of thinking about conservation, if you remember that 80% of the fragments in the Atlantic forest are super small, they are less than 50 hectares, and we relate with the area what we found just before. We see that the conservation of some specific functional groups of interactions are at risk, and they are restricted to a few pets of more pristine forest. And then we see some interactions like this one of a virola and Amphistus that had the only large interaction that had some potential to connect the landscape in this context is vanishing, basically, is disappearing. We find just in 2 sites of all the 16. And then just some fresh pictures from Pedro to wake up a bit. This is amazing pictures that from last week or so in the Atlantic Forest in Brazil. So this is a tucano eating and likely dispersing Jussara, that's palm tree from Brazil. And these interactions as what we are saying that are vanishing in the landscape, no? And this is amazing. The process of regurgitating and really dispersing the seeds is going to be a bit rarer in terms of large combinations of species. And this is Jacutinga as well, that's hardly found in just in more pristine areas. So, just to finish, if you want to take some take-home message, I would say, remember that the fragments in tropical forest, they are important because they still have a lot of biodiversity there, even after centuries of overexploitation and habitat destruction. And if these fragments have to be connected, it's important. I missed this one. Actually, just saying that if we miss one of these fragments, we're going to miss species and we're going to miss interactions. So in terms of planning what we should perhaps preserve, we should preserve everything that's left, because everything that's left is quite unique over there. And then the importance of these small-sized generalist species that seems to be the ones that are actually winning this battle and surviving more disturbed forests. And then the things about the change in the forest structure that I said before. And very quickly, what is next? We are now interested in the same metanetwork context, but to understand a bit of the phylogenetic diversity of these interactions. So the idea now for the next 6 months is to combine the phylogeny of the birds with the phylogeny of the trees and see if we can relate those with the measures of centrality that we found and also with the defaunation that is going on over there. So the idea is to capture a bit of the evolutionary time, of the evolutionary history of those interactions and see if, for example, the more central interactions have more or less baggage of evolutionary history, let's say, and then how much of this history, of this complexity of interactions we are losing with defaunation. This is a very, very embryonic project. It's just starting now, so ideas or techniques on how to do it is very welcoming. And the bird, the bird tree is amazingly easy to obtain from the birdtree.com. It's developed by Jets and his collaborator, and he has basically all these bird species in the world, and you just put your list of species there and you get your tree. Not only one, but a lot of combinations of tree. So this is, as you see, I just make a little bit of exercise here. This is Jacutinga, the larger ones, and these sides are the ones with smaller body mass that perform the central interaction. So we might have some trends going on actually here. And then for the plants, a bit more complicated, and that's why we are now collaborating with Miguel Verdu, which I'm very happy to see what we can get from there. And sorry if I talk too much. That's it. Thank you very much. And I am very happy to answer any question now.